Okay, I'll be honest. After Top Gun Maverick, I thought I was done with this era of Joseph Kosinski's work, post Tron Legacy. But as it turns out, I was wrong. It wasn't Kosinski I had a problem with at all. I just don't like Top Gun Maverick. And I know. Based on all of the buzz and love for that movie, I feel like I'm the only person on the planet who feels this way, but hey, here we are. Now, F1, on the other hand, is a completely different story. To me, this movie blows Top Gun Maverick out of the water in almost every way. Let's get into why. In F1, aging former Formula One prodigy Sonny Hayes is given one last shot at redemption when he's asked to join the struggling Apex GP racing team. Faced with the challenge of competing in a sport that has evolved beyond his prime, Sonny must navigate the pressures of modern F1, a tense rivalry with a cocky young teammate, and the weight of his own troubled past. As the team fights to prove themselves against impossible odds, F1 becomes a high-octane story of resilience, mentorship, and the unrelenting pursuit of greatness, both on and off the track. Now, first off, I'll admit, F1 can be seen as formulaic. Pun absolutely intended. But the movie does some clever things to step around the genre cliches, whether they're tied to sports movies or racing films specifically. For example, there's a love interest subplot between Brad Pitt and Kerry Condon's character, but it's handled in a way that feels understated and believable. It doesn't overshadow the main story, which is a relief. And Damsen Idris's character, Joshua, doesn't get a love interest of his own, which I think was a smart move. From my understanding, they did shoot a whole love interest subplot for his character, but they cut it out completely. And instead, his arc focuses on his struggles with the pressures of being a young, cocky, and extremely talented driver. And another thing I loved about F1 is a lack of a clear-cut villain. There's no rival team that's trying to sabotage Apex, no sneaking enemies lurking in the shadows until you get to the third act. Instead, the tension comes from within, mainly the rivalry between Sonny and Joshua. And from what I understand, this dynamic reflects a fascinating aspect of real-world Formula One. Your biggest competitor is often your own teammate. If I had to compare F1 to another movie, it would be Moneyball. This isn't just a movie about speed and adrenaline, it's a movie about strategy. It's about the clash between old school and new school approaches to racing, and how that tension plays out both on and off the track. And in a way, it's also about finding the heart and soul in a high-tech, hyper-competitive world, which made it resonate with me even more. And I gotta pause and talk about Brad Pitt for a second, because scandal noted, some people have some opinions on him, which I'm not gonna get into in this video, but the man is a charisma machine. There was a shot in this movie, probably several shots in this movie, where I was like, yeah, that right there, that's a modern day Paul Newman. He's been doing this for decades, and yet he hasn't lost an ounce of that magnetism. Sonny Hayes is a bit of a washed-up character, grizzled, beaten down, but still full of heart, and Brad Pitt nails every nuance of that. It's not my favorite performance of his for sure, but he draws the eye every time he's on screen. The supporting cast is also fantastic. Damsen Idris, who I had never seen before in another project, I don't think, brings the perfect mix of arrogance and vulnerability to Joshua. Kerry Condon is wonderful and truly one of my favorite actresses to watch at the moment, and Javier Bardem is a delight whenever he's on screen. And the same can be said for any of the other character actors who show up in this film in their small bit parts. The world of this racing team feels very fleshed out and feels very lived in, and I really appreciated that about this film. Now, let's talk about what we all came here to talk about, and that's the races. They are, quite simply put, spectacular. The cinematography puts you right into the action. You're inside the helmet, you're behind the wheel, you're feeling the speed and intensity of every lap. Even if you strip away the story entirely, the races alone would be worth the price of admission. Each one feels unique and like little short films stitched into a larger narrative. The score, composed by Hans Zimmer, is an absolute standout. We also have these blends of Scorsese-style needle drops with this pulsating energy of techno reminiscent of Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's work on Challengers. On top of that, Zimmer brings in his signature orchestral swells, which by the end of the movie just feels like a warm hug. What I also appreciated is how the movie doesn't spoon-feed its audience. You're not bogged down with explanations of F1 rules or racing jargon. Instead, you pick up on all these intricacies of the sport through context and dialogue. And this is something that Hollywood has often struggled with, over-explaining things. I'm looking at you, Mission Impossible. But F1 avoids that pitfall for the most part. One exception is that throughout the film we get this announcer's commentary during the races, which did start to feel a little heavy-handed after a while, but overall, the film strikes a great balance. Also, I gotta note that this movie has real catharsis. One of my favorite moments comes near the end of the film when Sonny finally gets a chance to shine. There's this beautiful sequence where he's in the lead, flying down the track, and you could see the pure joy and freedom on his face, or as much of it as you could see through his helmet. It's a moment that really captures the magic of racing and why Sonny loves it so much. I almost got teary-eyed at this sequence. Now, there's this thing I've been trying to grapple with cinema lately, and I've been trying to kind of put words to this idea and thought in my head, and the term that I always come to is competence porn. And I always think about this when I'm talking about movies that I love, and F1 is kind of a prime example of this. There's something endlessly satisfying about watching incredibly skilled people doing what they're incredibly good at, and this film has it in spades. Sonny Hayes is a bit of a bastard for most of the movie. He's cocky, abrasive, not always easy to root for, but man is he good at racing. The film is essentially about him being great at what he does and looking great while doing it. And there's something undeniably compelling about that kind of character. And when I think of other movies that capture this competence porn vibe, The Martian and Moneyball immediately come to mind. Like those films, F1 gives us a protagonist who's flawed but undeniably talented. Sonny takes risks, sometimes too many, and his ego often gets the better of him. But at the same time, you can't help but admire his skills and his determination. Watching him rebuild Apex from the ground up, transforming it into a winning team, feels like watching a classic Western. It's got that same mythic quality of a hero riding into town, setting things right, and then heading off into the sunset. And that right there is going to bring me to this idea of the mythos behind stories like this. Sure, you can call F1 formulaic or cookie cutter, and I wouldn't necessarily argue with you. But that criticism only holds weight when the film surrounding the formula feels hollow or soulless. And in my opinion, that's not the case here. This is a story where the formula works because it's executed with heart and purpose. And before I go too much further, I do want to dig into this idea of formulaic storytelling and why it's not the death knell for a movie that some critics and some of you watching this video might suggest. The phrase cookie cutter often gets thrown around as a pejorative, as though adhering to a tried and true narrative structure is inherently lazy or uninspired. But here's the thing. Storytelling is built on patterns. From ancient myths to modern blockbusters, the same archetypes and plot beats show up again and again because they resonate. These aren't just cliches, they're frameworks for exploring timeless themes in ways that feel familiar but can still be deeply personal and impactful. Take the classic John Wayne Western, for example. There's a reason why the lone gunman who rides into town, fixes what's broken, and leaves at sunset still holds a special place in cinematic history. It's not just about the plot, it's about what the plot represents. These stories tap into universal ideas about redemption, justice, and the impermanence of a hero's role in the world. To put it more simply, they're less about the destination and more about the journey, the characters, and the emotions that unfold along the way. And the same thing can be said about the grizzled veteran and cocky rookie trope, which we see in so many sports movies, including F1. Sure, it's predictable. You know that the elder is going to teach the rookie some humility, and the rookie is going to inspire the elder to believe in something again. But when done well, this narrative is incredibly rewarding. Why, you might ask? Well, because it reflects something inherently human, the passing of wisdom from one generation to the next, and the way that relationships can transform us. These archetypes persist because they echo experiences we all know or aspire to: mentorship, growth, and the reconciliation with our own limitations. So, why do some moviegoers and critics bristle at these cookie-cutter stories? I think it's less about the structure itself and more about how it's executed. When a film relies on these frameworks without injecting any heart, nuance, or creativity, it feels hollow, like a story on autopilot. But when filmmakers bring care and craftsmanship, note the word craftsmanship, to the formula, it transcends predictability. It becomes about the details, the performances, the dialogue, the cinematography, the specific emotional beats that make this iteration of the story feel alive. That's what makes formulaic stories beautiful. They're not lazy. They're reliable scaffolding for infinite variation. They give us a language we already understand so that we could focus on what's unique about this version of the tale. When I watch a movie like F1, which leans into familiar beats like the elder-mentor dynamic or the redemption arc, I don't feel cheated by its predictability. I feel comforted, even exhilarated, by how it takes something old and makes it feel fresh again. At their best, these types of stories remind us why we fell in love with movies in the first place. They're not about reinventing the wheel. They're about taking that wheel and driving it somewhere meaningful. And if not meaningful, it better be entertaining. And I think we have a winner here. Anyway, tangent over. Let's wrap up talking about F1. Of course, the film isn't perfect. The addition of this last-minute third-act villain, this shady board member played by Tobias Menzies, felt unnecessary. By that point, the stakes were already high enough. I was fully invested in the team's journey, them coming together as a family, Sonny's health struggles. So throwing in an extra antagonist just kind of felt like overkill. And while I think F1 handles its formulaic elements well, I really can't ignore the similarities to Top Gun Maverick, a film that I admittedly dislike. The opening scene, for example, feels like a direct homage or a carbon copy, with Brad Pitt waking up in a trailer, doing his morning routine, and then proving himself during a NASCAR race in Daytona. It's a bit on the nose, but thankfully the movie carves its own identity as it goes along, but it's hard to ignore some of the similarities between Top Gun Maverick and F1. But all in all, F1 is a hell of a good time. It's got exhilarating races, strong performances, a killer score by Hans Zimmer, and just enough emotional depth to keep you hooked. It's part summer blockbuster, part love letter and advertisement for Formula One, and I think it strikes that balance really well. But what did you guys think? Let me know down in the comments what you thought of F1. Am I totally off base for hating Top Gun Maverick but liking F1? Do you think that they're more comparable to each other than I'm seeing? Personally, I think that these movies feel like totally different universes to me, and I prefer this universe to Top Gun Maverick, but hey, let me know down in the comments if you think I'm wrong. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified when new videos come out on the channel if you haven't already, and go follow me on Letterboxd, and I'll see you all next time.